Welcome to Permission to Thrive. I'm your host, Suzi Lula. As a spiritual therapist for over 20 years, I have the honor and privilege of ushering women and mothers just like you on a journey from simply surviving to powerfully thriving. I also have the honor of raising our son, Will, who is now a young adult, with my longtime partner, Jamie, so I'm right there on the journey with you. Consider this your personal sanctuary, your space to meet your heart, embrace your messy, and come home to your most authentic, extraordinary self. My hope is that you leave resourced and inspired because you are here to shine. Welcome to Permission to Thrive. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of Permission to Thrive. It's a really special episode to my heart because I've gathered three of my favorite people on planet Earth, Devon Evans, Joe Argazzi, and Maureen Spielman, three of my dear friends, but also three of my colleagues. They are each and all soul care coaches in your own right. You work with clients, you practice with your own spouses and partners and kids and life. And we're in the middle of this theme of love and self-love this month. And I'm so aware that on my own journey of self-love, and maybe many of you listening and the three of you, we all crave love. We all want to know that real inner experience of what in the world is self-love. We know by now that self-love is important. We all want loving relationships. And yet, at least for me, the practice of self-love was often very elusive to me. I heard the phrase, but I didn't exactly know what it was. And so I've invited you all here because I know that you all practice both your own self-love and relationship with yourself, as well as creating and cultivating deep, connected, rich relationships with all those in your life. And so I thought we could have a conversation so that those of you listening would walk away with a clearer idea of what exactly self-love is, and then how exactly that is the heart and that is the bridge to spiral that love out into all of your relationships with your children, with your spouses, at work, with your coworkers, with your clients, if you are a coach or therapist. So welcome. So happy to have you.
Thank you.
Hi, Suzi.
Thanks, Suzi.
I'm happy already. So I thought I would just start by going around and letting each one, maybe Maureen, you can jump in first. And I just will ask you a series of questions about love, self-love, all things love today. And I was wondering if you could give a specific example or two of what exactly does your self-love practice look like? Maybe you could share like the old Maureen, the new Maureen. I know you practice self-love. What does it look like in your day-to-day life?
Well, thanks, Suzi, for asking the question. It's a really big one. And there's a lot of directions I could go. It's such a process and it's such a practice. And when I began to learn the language that surrounded even the word love or self-love, it included things like compassion, non-judgment, not abandoning myself. Love could have been at the center, but there were all these words kind of swirling around it. And I was taking those words into my consciousness. And at first, I think really learning them on the level of the mind. And for me, it was becoming aware of a new language. It was becoming aware of my old operating language and the ways in which I was treating myself. And when I really began to pay attention more and more how my voices of not self-love and the ways in which I was hard on myself, and I honed in and I started to learn how to be with those voices and come to them with compassion and understanding, that a new level of knowing what it felt like to practice a self-love began to emerge. So I would first say that it's a process, it's a practice. It begins with awareness and a willingness to hold myself with just so much love as you would a small child or a newborn baby. And I think in the whole process, it was learning a whole new language that I don't think I had ever really learned.
I love that so much. I hear something in what you're saying in your initial intention around self love. What you first became aware of was all that in your consciousness that was not self loving. You mentioned self judgment, self criticism. And so that's a really important aspect of, and you're saying this is a process, which it is. And I think that is a particular important part of the process for anyone listening, where you're really looking to make self love more tangible and more practical. One doorway in could be, oh, I'm becoming aware right now of all the ways I'm not treating myself with self love and compassion. I'm becoming aware that there is self judgment and self criticism. So that awareness can be a real initial doorway in. And then, as you're saying, it's a process. Excellent. Is there any specific practice that you typically do during your day? Before I go on, I guess I'll go to you, Joe, next. But if there is anything specific you wanted to share that you do on a daily basis?
Well, I think the one that I continually try to welcome into my life every day is tuning into what am I feeling and starting my day with the question about what is coming up for you? What are you feeling? What are your emotions? And that's going to set the stage of how I navigate my relationships. What are you feeling right now, Maureen? And that is an act of self love right there. If I can go into my emotions and consider what is coming up for me based on the fact that they're here to really inform me and give me lots of information and guidance to how I can be with myself and in my relationships. So I would say this seemingly simple question of how are you feeling? What are you feeling? And looking at the needs underneath is a practice.
I love this. So, anyone listening, you could jot down that question, because just hearing the question, oh, how are you feeling today, Maureen? Just as if when we were children, had we had grown-ups around us that would notice us and say at any given point in our day, oh, how are you feeling, Susie? How are you feeling, Joe? How are you feeling, Devon? It sends a message to our core self that I am worthy of someone's interest. I'm worthy of someone's heart. I'm worthy of someone's connection. And so by us asking that question to ourselves, not only does it create that inner connection that we're looking for, but it's sending an unconscious core message to ourselves that you are worthy, Maureen, of even checking in and asking yourself how you're feeling today. So, for everyone listening, please jot that question down. I think it's beautiful. I have this practice before I even open my eyes in the morning. Every morning, I put my hand on my heart and I share things with myself like, I'm going to be here for you today. I'm right here. You are enough. I'm right here. I'm going to be with you all day. Words of affirmation, connective phrases. So I love that. Fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing, because it's already making it more clear. And I haven't even gotten to you, Joe and Devon. So thank you very much. Joe, do you want to jump on the self-love practice train?
Yeah, absolutely. And look at the company I get to keep while being on this train. Thank you, Maureen. Piggybacking on what she said, my original concept of self-love, and this was unconscious, but it's like was influenced, and I think for many of us, familial, societal, and cultural, which meant my focus was external.
Mm.
So my self-love was predicated upon what you thought of me.
Mm.
That was huge. If I could feel love from you, then I must be loving. Then I'm worthy of love. And so it was so externally focused, and that set up a whole pattern of codependency, of people pleasing, and I got pretty darn good at it. The problem is when they were having a bad day. So self-love for me today is being aware of those dynamics, the tendency to look outside myself for validation. And it's not that it can't come in and that it doesn't feel good, but it no longer is the cake. It's the icing on the cake. My awareness of, like what Maureen was saying, is that self-love, and it needed to become practical, pragmatic. I love this question so much in this whole episode, because what is the practicality of self-love? And it's not about looking externally any longer for it. It's about the most important things for me are the two tools of compassion and non-judgment. So when my survival self would look for the external validation and it was conditioned to do that, I now go, oh, well, that's interesting. Is there something that I'm needing? Is there something that I'm seeking right now to feel soothed, to feel at peace, to feel connected? Because the whole ball game lies within me.
Mm.
Love of self, because that's really what it is. Can I appreciate, and most importantly, in the beginning for me was all the survival tactics and tools that I learned. It was like to not judge them, to be aware of them and have compassion for them. And that is real. Because when I find the knee-jerk reaction to want to, oh my gosh, I want to please them in some way. Maybe if I buy them something, they will love me. And that's a very, very young pattern. And I
Mm.
look at that, it's like, bless you. It's
Mm.
okay. Of course you want to do that because you're looking for love from them. And honey, there's nothing wrong with that. But let me share something with you. If your motive is to do that because you want love from them, maybe we need to just sit here together, you and me. And it doesn't mean that I don't do that, but what's my motive underneath that? Because
Mm.
when I do it unconsciously, within that is actually an act of self-abandonment, which
Exactly.
at the core is what I'm really trying to run away from or
Mm.
trying to get those needs met. That's almost every single time the core thing in terms of when I'm not feeling lovable, it's self-abandonment. It's like, let me embrace even that. Not even that, that most of all.
Especially that. Exactly.
Especially that. Yeah,
I,
beautifully. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I love what you're saying, and I hope everyone listening is tracking this. So I'm going to say back what I think I'm hearing you say. I think I'm hearing you say that for you, the whole idea of love and self love when you were little, like many of us, was very externally set up. So
Mhm.
that if someone was pleased with you, so to speak, you felt lovable. But then what happened when someone wasn't so pleased with you?
Mm,
So your sense of lovability, so to speak, and worthiness was
yes.
contingent upon the external energy coming towards you. And then that set you up, even in adulthood, to become aware of ways that still as an adult, you sometimes find yourself going externally for love. We call it codependent, that kind of dysfunction that we all practice sometimes. And so that's part one, is that you are aware that, quote, the old Joe had been set up with an external orientation to
Yeah.
love versus an internal orientation to love. And you carried that external orientation into your adulthood and you can see it play out. And so part of your journey that you're describing is transforming the external to the internal. So that's part one. But the other thing that I think that you're saying is so important is that as you see your survival self, even in adulthood, and you might become aware, oh, why am I buying that gift for that person? What is this? Am I seeking that external validation? What you're saying is that rather than judging that behavior or potential behavior, rather than judging it, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm still doing that. Rather than that, you're saying, I love that part of me. Oh, Joe, of course you want to go buy that gift for Susie because because of course you're seeking her validation, you're seeking her love, then you'll feel better. And the way even you said it, for those of you listening, go back, listen to the tone of voice that you're using. It's such a connected, such
Mm,
a compassionate tone of voice, tone of energy. And so that's another, like Maureen was saying, this is another doorway in. Maureen was saying, one doorway in is to become aware of the ways I'm not being so self loving, I'm self criticizing, self judging. And Joe, you're saying another doorway in is to notice when you are in adulthood, still carrying out those old patterns, but instead of judging the old patterns, you're embracing and seeing, oh, I see. Here's the need underneath there is you're just looking to be loved. Well, I got
100%.
you. You know, you just come sit on my lap right now. I
That's
got you. I'll love you right now. And then the other would be icing on the cake, like you said.
That's right. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. You said it. So, this is our intention, everyone listening. Our intention today is to dive in and tackle these very elusive concepts: love, self love. What does it feel like? How to cultivate it? We all want these loving relationships. I was sharing in a recent episode that when you look at research of those passing on almost to the person, and I know Devon, you work with the elderly. When people pass on, one of the biggest regrets is that they didn't love more and they didn't know how to love more, both themselves and others. So this is why we're seeking to make this practical and tangible, and we hope that it's doing that for all of you listening. So Devon, I'll jump over to you. Any before and afters you want to paint, any pictures of your self-love practices?
Well, I just want to say I can relate so much to both what Maureen and Joe shared, and I wholeheartedly concur. And in my own experience, I was very much in the identity of being a caregiver to my children, to my husband, to the elderly. And, years ago, you wrote that book, Motherhood Evolution. And I read it, and it just, on so many levels, gave me permission to turn that love and attention inward and to take deep self-care, take care of myself, and have it be a profound practice that actually nourished me, filled me, so that actually I could be more to the people around me. And it is a practice, and it is interesting because it shows up in a number of different ways. But like you talked about earlier, that attention, giving someone your full attention and being present and listening deeply is one of the greatest gifts we can give someone. And I began to understand that, I can do that for myself. And it is a practice. And to just begin to turn that attention, kind of make a U-turn from being focused on the external to pivoting and turning that attention inward, and then deeply listening internally. And what comes with that is I was pretty good at loving all the parts of myself that were, really easy to love. But through some of your courses and the motherhood evolution, I began to grow my capacity to sit with the messy parts of myself and the parts of myself that I thought were unlovable and that I was trying to hide or change, or I judge them or criticize them, and begin to create a relationship with all parts of myself. There's that saying that I love you just the way you are. I could do that for others, but I did not have the capacity to do that for myself. And so that has been a big part of my journey, is learning to love all of me and to be able to sit with those uncomfortable parts of myself, and through self-love and compassion and deep listening and acceptance, to be able to glean the insights, the messages of the deeper parts of myself. And it's so interesting, as I was able to do that for myself, then I was able to do that with the people in my life. So the capacity internally grew, and then externally it showed up. And so what that looks like for me is I just try to pause throughout the day and just turn my attention inward to myself and be with my inner world, and to be able to listen and connect with my heart, my soul, whatever you want to call it. And doing that on a regular basis allows me to interact with people and meet my own need, because in the past, I was interacting with everybody else and I had a little bit of an agenda. I was trying to get my needs met through my relationships and the external world. I actually didn't know I was doing that. So just having that level of awareness and then meeting those needs myself took everybody else off the hook. And then I could relate to them in such a much more relaxed, deep, and authentically connected way, where they could show up with all their parts and I could be present for that and not need them to be a certain way in order for me to feel good or at peace or content. And like that's the whole dynamic of it really shifted for me once I turned that attention inward and grew my capacity to be and love all parts.
This is so powerful. I've jotted down a couple of specific things that you said that I would love to offer back for everyone listening, because each one so far, Maureen and Joe, have given really specific, like Maureen, you asked that question, how are you feeling today? That's a great takeaway. Joe, you offered like, oh, of course you're still trying to meet that external need for love by the thought of giving this gift. So you mentioned a couple of very specific things, Devon, that I think are great takeaways. You mentioned the phrase, I love myself or I accept myself just the way you are, just the way I am. And that is a phrase, again, if you research people passing on, that is something that comes back over and over and over again as a regret. I wish I had been able to accept myself just as I am. And it sounds so simplistic, or maybe it seems like it sounds so simplistic. And that is one of the most powerful energetics and way of being that we can have with ourselves. Imagine any one of you listening as a child, if you had gotten the message every day of your life in some way, shape, or form, oh, honey, I accept you exactly as you are. Oh, you are acceptable exactly as you are. Your messy parts. Oh, this happened. You stumbled in this way. You stole that candy from that store. I accept you. Doesn't mean I won't assist you with your behaviors, but you are acceptable. You are lovable. Just as you are, exactly as you are. Another way that you will hear this back, and I hear this often in classes I teach with clients, when they ask themselves, what was that deepest need I so needed to hear when I was little, is you are enough exactly as you are. So you are okay exactly as you are. So any way for those of you listening that you want to take that phrase that Devon is offering, say, I am okay exactly as I am. It's the exactly as I am. I'm lovable. I'm acceptable. I accept myself exactly as I am. If you turn that into a consistent language and practice, it has the power and the capacity to change the neurochemistry in our bodies, to completely relax our nervous system, calm our nervous system. And when we have the ability to self-regulate our nervous system and our nervous system calms down, that's when the neurochemical rewiring can happen the most easily and effectively. So another reason why we're doing this episode around self-love, it's not just like these fancy, beautiful words. It's a way of being with ourselves that changes the neurochemistry in our body, that changes the neuroplasticity in our brain, that changes the nervous system activity. It calms it, it relaxes it, and it allows us to connect and puts us in that flow. So I thank you for that phrase. And then the other thing that you said that I think is so important is that you said you've learned to pause throughout your day. I think that that's so important. We often think that these practices are like, we have to meditate 30 minutes every morning, and then we have to write in our journal. And we hear them as these morning activities, and they're great. And I practice all of those morning rituals. I love them. And what I think I'm hearing you say is that you seek to pause often throughout your day. Maybe you're doing your dishes. Maybe you're doing the laundry. Maybe you're prepping for caring for one of your clients. In whatever way, you take a moment. And what I think I heard you say was you were so attuned, as Joe was saying, externally to care for all those around you. But now when you pause, it's like a U-turn. And the way that you were so externally oriented to care for all these other people, you include yourself in that mix. And the specific example you used that I think was very important is that what we all crave the most is to be deeply heard and deeply seen. And you were very busy doing that for everyone else, forgetting that you too crave to be deeply heard. And I love the visual of the U-turn. So you're pausing at whatever moment in the day and you're recognizing, I give this out, I radiate this out externally over and over and over again. I'm going to do a U-turn right now. And I'm going to provide this seeing of myself, being with myself. And you mentioned all the messy parts. It brings me to the next question, which is, can you give an example, Maureen, of a way that you specifically practiced self-love, loving yourself, making that U-turn, including yourself, pausing, all the things you guys have been speaking of, a specific example of something that you did within yourself that then impacted your relationship with someone else in your life? Like, how did your own practice of self-love then spiral out and affect a relationship with someone else? Is that question clear?
Yeah, I think so. And I'll do my best. One thing I have to say is that even having this conversation here today, it's a much slowed down conversation to me. And it just naturally brings me into that heart space.
Mm.
And in that heart space, I can access more expansion, more spaciousness, more possibility. It feels like a tenderness. I think that was what I was trying to say earlier with like holding a newborn. It's the tenderness, just how we're all saying if we can hold ourselves so tenderly. For me, just qualities that are so important in creating this new culture we're creating, this new culture. And like Joe said, society that we want to live in and breathe in and be in. I think that this may ring true to a lot of people right now. I have a child going through receiving information from colleges. It's that time of year where a lot of information is coming in via email. And I know that I have to be emotionally, or I want to be. It's my intention to be emotionally available. My old patterns, woo, big time earlier. I think a lot of people can relate just to the suppression of our needs, suppression of my voice. And so I have another intention of being there for another, but also using my voice where I need to. So I was thinking of this the other day when I knew some news would be coming through. And so I was almost positive that when I picked my child up from school, that he may be carrying some news. And so I think I began to feel energetically drained by it. And so I tuned into myself and went into okay, what do you need, Maureen? And I think what was calling from within is I needed more rest. And I had the luxury of putting to the side some of the work that I needed that day, but there was like a definite calling that I needed some restoration and just some room and some space in order to, it felt like, prepare energetically or emotionally for the relationship with my child. And so I took time and I allowed that was the self-love that and the self care was to rest and to give myself that so I could come to the relationship with the energy. And so I spent a lot of the day giving myself that experience, like what you're feeling matters, and tune into that, and don't push hard today. And so lo and behold, when I picked my child up from school, he was very sad. He was holding a lot of emotions about denial that had come through. And because I had given myself space and I had like I was just mentioning, the whole slowdown we're practicing right now. I slowed down. I didn't need an answer. It was self-love not to feel like I had to have an answer. It was self-love to know that I could show up just with sacred listening alone. And that would be love for myself and love for the other. And it was just such a beautiful practice of giving this really expansive and luscious sort of space for him to grieve the loss of the information. And we did that together. And I was thinking about it because I said out loud, you can be angry, you can be sad, you can feel all the emotions, you can go in the house, you can scream into a pillow, don't punch the wall. You can do anything you want or need or feeling to do with those emotions. But it dawned on me, just as we're sitting here today, because this was yesterday, that I was allowing myself to have all those feelings and emotions too, because I'd be lying if when these decisions and all this information from the outer world come in, I have to filter that. I have to look at my conditioning around it. I have to do all the things. And so by giving myself space and room to feel what I'm feeling and also do the same for him, it was just a beautiful practice of tending to myself before I tended to the other. And I think that you say that a lot. Take care of yourself first and foremost. That for me, it's going in and taking care of my emotions instead of projecting onto another. Number one is my work. And number two is my work is exercising that voice, exercising, because I not only suppressed the emotions, but I suppressed that physical voice when I was young. So it's the dance of allowance of be with the emotions, but use your voice, Maureen. You can, if you've got some suggestions here, you don't have to be just this vessel for the sacred listening alone. It can be the both and. And so it ended up being, I felt like a really beautiful experience because I walked myself through it slowly. And then it allowed me to do that in the external world as well. And it was a win for everybody.
Yeah. It's just so beautifully described, Maureen. I hope that everyone listening could also really track that, because I'm so able to be with you on what you just expressed to us. Those feelings that come up, I've also been through that journey of the college applications and hearing back, but it could be anything with our children, with our spouse. And you felt that rush of energy. And that is a self-loving practice, the taking the time to be present with yourself. You said many gems here. So you first started with this word tender. And I think that is something for all of us, no matter where you all are on your journey in life. We don't live in a culture right now that promotes tenderness. We live in a culture right now that is very corporate and doing and producing and busy. And the quality of tenderness, for all of you listening, if you can imagine when you were young, if those around you had had the capacity to show you deep tenderness on a day-to-day basis, that sends your core self the message, I'm worthy of this tenderness. Tenderness is another doorway into intimacy. The tenderness, it allows our heart to be unguarded and undefended. So I love that you started with this quality. And if you take nothing else away from today and you want to just become contemplative and practice, what would it be like to be more tender with myself? And what would it be like to be more tender with my child or my partner or my coworker? What would that be like? That in itself, to me, is a wonderful definition of self-love, applying tenderness to ourselves and others. And then you went on to describe knowing that you were going to be picking your son up. And one of the questions I think I heard you ask was, what do you need, Maureen? And so I want to highlight that question because each of you have been saying specific phrases, and I've been saying to everyone listening to write them down. But that question, what do you need? What do you need, Joe? What do you need, Devon? What do you need, Suzi? What do you need, Maureen? Imagine yourself as a child and someone coming up to you day to day and you're sharing what's going on and they're asking you the question, what do you need? And I know when I work with clients and I start having clients ask themselves this question, often and most often what I hear back is, I have no idea what I need. And so I want to highlight that question because we're not asking the question, what do you need, Maureen, solely for the answer. We're asking the question because it sends our core self the message that you are worthy of hearing the question. And so often we don't know because we're not used to asking ourselves the question. So we're just detached from that question answer. But if you ask yourself that enough times, what do I need? What do I need? before you know it, the answers will start coming because you will have created that safety in your consciousness for those answers to come up. So I love that you asked the question, what do you need? It's a definite jot it down, a takeaway for all of you listening. And then you heard for you that day, you needed rest and restoration. And so you gave yourself that luxury of space. And like Devon was saying, pause. And you allowed yourself to rest and have all of your feelings present. So I also want to speak to that for those of you listening. And you're like, I would love to have that luxury, but I would never have had the time. I have 3 little ones under the age of 6, and that rest wasn't possible. I want to say for anyone, you want to go back to what Devon was sharing about taking the pauses. So even asking the question was so important. And even if it looked different in someone's life, like it's just when you were driving over to pick him up, you were going to take the drive anyway to pick him up. But even if on that drive you were saying, what do you need, Maureen? And even if it was that you had 2 little ones in the back and they were arguing, you can't always change your outer situation. Although I will say giving yourselves 5-minute pause goes a long way. The benefit you get from those 5 minutes is exponential. But let's just say you couldn't. Even driving over saying, oh my gosh, I can imagine you're feeling XYZ. Oh, I can imagine you're having all these feelings come up. What you're feeling matters too, Maureen. What you're feeling matters too. How many of us railroad over that? And we're so externally oriented, like Joe was saying, we're so externally oriented that we're not even saying, Joe, what you're feeling right now matters too. Maureen, yes, this is about your son. And what you're feeling right now matters too. Because we are going to have feelings when anyone around us may be in pain. And so to have given yourself the space to say what you're feeling right now matters, Maureen, allowed you then, when your son got in the car, to allow him to have his feelings. So we can see how your entire interaction once he got in the car was significantly enhanced because you had taken that time for yourself. So yes, we're slowing it down today, but even if you have 3 minutes, even if it was a condensed version, I can assure you, and like Devon was saying when I wrote the Motherhood Evolution, just those moments of standing in front of washing the dishes, it is the tenderness that you're speaking of. It is taking the time to make the U-turns. It is those small practices that seem so insignificant. When you take them, they become very significant. So thank you very much for that sharing. And I will jump to you, Joe. Specific example happened to come to your mind of a way that it impacted your outer relationships?
Yeah, I have like 68 years of life experience. So let me look for one. First of all, I was so moved, Maureen, and what you reflected back, Suzi, about that I'm even worthy of just asking the question, what do you need? In and of itself, that has never occurred to me. And my whole body's tingling right now because that is so beautiful and powerful for me. And the other thing I just want to echo again is the slowing down, as Devon was speaking to, and pausing. So I'm not just so reactionary. My whole life was reactionary, and then beginning to do a lot of this work. It's like slow down, be still, get in touch with what the emotions are. I had no idea what my emotions are. It was just all intellectual. And so as I began to get in touch with the emotional guidance system that's very specific for me, and begin to be aware when I became reactionary, triggered by something, one phrase that was really helpful to me in doing this work is that if it's hysterical, it's historical, which meant if I was really triggered in a big way, it had nothing to do with what's currently going on. It has something to do with past. More often than not, little Joe. You say, oh, has nothing to do with currently what's happening. I got triggered, and take time to go back to that and see what's being triggered and what's needed around that. So to that end, I was with my partner one afternoon. We were out, beautiful afternoon. We were listening to a guitar player singing Over the Rainbow. We were outside. I'm looking at this little, I think she might have been 7 or 8 year old girl, and she was smiling and I was smiling and I was singing to her Over the Rainbow. And my partner, bless, turned to me and said, "Stop singing." And all of a sudden, boom, I felt immediately like I had done something wrong. And I'm in my 60s, just kind of hanging out doing but it was such a deep, deep, deep place within me that like felt, oh my God, I've done something wrong. Then I got angry. Then I got resentful. I wanted to retaliate. I thought, I'm just being sweet with this little girl. How dare all the noise, right? The reactionary part came up. I've been doing this work long enough to know, do not react. This is your stuff. It's got nothing to do with what he said. It's all within you. So by the time we got home and he walked off into the bedroom and shut the door, that part of me wanted to follow him right in because I felt abandoned. That was little Joe, not the adult man. He's just doing what he's doing. But the urge to go, and I actually got up and walked and put my hand on the doorknob to open it. It's like, oh, honey, I know you do, but come on, let's go sit on the couch. And the internal dialogue was, I don't want to sit on the couch. I need to talk to him to approve. I need to talk to him so he sees I'm a good person. So, it's all it's just in all its iterations. Core is abandonment. So I went and I sat myself on the couch and I let myself just go through all of that and just listen. It's like, what do you need? And he just having a tantrum. It's like, it's okay. You can have your tantrum. So understandable. I'm here with you. You're doing nothing wrong and you've done nothing. And it took, I would say, maybe a good 20 minutes in being present. This wasn't a quick fix thing because the core was so deep. But as I was willing to be present without judgment and with compassion and with an open heart and that beautiful tenderness Maureen spoke to, he calmed down.
Mm,
And that young part of me began to integrate with the adult.
mm.
And I was there. Interestingly enough, there was nothing to say to my partner. I didn't need to get up and go and have this whole, or look what I've gained. Oh, I've learned all this. Didn't need any of that. Everything was fine. That was so paramount. It was like, wow, good for you. So interestingly enough, about 20 minutes later, we went for a walk. And he just turned to me and said, what happened for you? Then I was happy to share my process and my experience. And as you both were saying, I felt heard and I felt seen.
Mm.
But it wasn't necessary for me to be okay. I appreciated that. And I appreciated the connection and the intimacy with them. But it wasn't necessary. I had already done my own.
This is so good. I hope everyone listening can relate to you. I certainly can in spades. You just painted such a picture of what would have happened had you not had these practices of self-love. What I'm hearing, going back to what Devon was saying about being with the messy parts, you have a practice clearly of being able to be present with your quote messy parts. So what you're saying is that there you are innocently singing, and the universe is just hilarious to me. It's just, we all have to just be light about it. This is all happening somewhere over the rainbow. And then your partner says one thing. I'm so appreciative, Joe, that you were so willing to be so real and transparent, especially so you shared that you felt, when he said that, you felt like you had done something wrong. But that you felt hurt, but you felt angry. And then I could so relate. I love when you said that even by the time you guys got home, you were wanting to connect with him and you were even going to the door and you were right outside the door. I just can so relate. But this is a practice of self-love, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Practice of self-love is when you're getting ready to knock on that door, to have the bandwidth to take your hand, keep it on your own body, and to go sit down with yourself. And what you said was, when you sat down with yourself, that inner child within you was having a tantrum. And I love that you shared that you were angry. The child within you was having huge, big feelings, volcanic feelings, explosive feelings. you were having a tantrum. The inner part of you was having a tantrum. And I love that so much, because what happens in our relationships, typically, we don't know how to go be present with our own big emotions, like Devon was speaking of. So you gave a description of that's how to be present. You allowed your younger self, your inner parts, your energy, however you want to language that, you allowed yourself to have all your feelings. You allowed yourself to feel angry. You allowed yourself to have a temper tantrum. And because you allowed yourself to have your own temper tantrum, it passed. And because you allowed yourself to have your own temper tantrum, you didn't then go have a temper tantrum with your partner. And I hope everyone can appreciate that as much as I can appreciate that, being that I am in a long-term relationship for over 20 something years. And I can so relate to the moments that I have not been so successful at not having a temper tantrum with Jamie, but allowing my own self to have my own feelings. So thank you, deep bow, appreciate the authenticity and letting us in, because I think everybody can relate.
Yeah, and I just want to say real quick, and I probably did, but during that temper tantrum, I did not judge it.
Right?
I specifically told him, you're doing nothing wrong. You did nothing wrong. It's
Yeah.
okay. And hold the space for him to have his feelings.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Beautiful. And Devon, do you have anything that comes to mind as an example that your own practice with yourself directly impacted another relationship in your outer life?
Definitely. And I just wanted to say, it's just so beautiful, because from both what Maureen and Joe shared, like Maureen just sharing that one simple practice of pausing throughout your day and checking in and asking, what do you need, is life-changing. And her example was just so beautiful of how she met her own needs, took care of herself, and then she showed up for her child in such a rich, satisfying, meaningful, connected, memorable way. And then when Joe shared his experience, it's just such a testament to, he had so many things going on. So he was deeply connected internally with a certain level of consciousness and awareness that he got triggered, but yet he didn't completely lose himself. He was witnessing and observing this happening inside of him, but was more invested in his awareness and consciousness and deeper part of himself. And so it was both and, but he more so was in his soul or his heart or his higher consciousness, and was able to watch and witness and glean the insights and messages from all of that. And that is a testament to how much practicing Joe has done, because all of that can be going on at the same time. And yet he can stay in his center, he can feel his worthiness, his wholeness, and his completeness, and still be able to process all of that in real time and continue to move through his interactions. So I just felt like that was another beautiful example. Mine, through self-care as a spiritual practice, you talk about how making those deposits into ourself again and again pays off when we get into a situation where we are triggered. So you often talk about, while you're washing the dishes, in your inner world, be acknowledging yourself and appreciating yourself and shining the spotlight on the things that you're grateful for about yourself. And that you're just making all of these deposits so that when you have a challenging situation, yes, just like Joe communicated, clearly he has made a lot of deposits in knowing his inner world, because he was able to hold that presence. And so I have definitely, through that practice, realized that I used to think that my well-being, my worthiness was dependent on how my external life looked and the choices of the people I love made in their lives. And through that practice, and it took time, I began to have the realization, oh, my well-being and my worthiness is independent and not at all dependent on those external moving pieces. And that's why I was so habituated into micromanaging and controlling everything in my external world, because I was trying to get my needs met, feel worthy and whole and complete and at peace and content. And the more I did that practice and was like, oh, I'm still okay. I still feel centered. I feel good. I feel inwardly connected. I became less botherable. That unbotherable state became more familiar to me. So my highest gradient probably is with my children. And I have 2 adult daughters now. And I remember an interaction that I was having with my older daughter. And she is very smart, very independent, very confident. And she kind of marches to the beat of her own drummer and makes her own choices. And oftentimes her choices and my choices don't always align. And it can be triggering for me. And I remember she said something and I said, oh, did you make a decision about that? And she looked at me and our eyes met and there was a beat of silence. And you could tell she was a little hesitant to share with me the decision that she made, because she probably knew it would be hard for me to hear. But she chose to share it with me anyway, which I acknowledge myself that she felt safe enough to share it. So that felt good. She shared her decision. And again, our eyes locked and there was that big pause. And it was a choice point. It was a moment where I could click back into the old way of being, and I could pretend to be calm on the outside, but inside I was triggered and anxious. And I would try to artfully convince her, well, did you consider this? And what about this possibility? And I would have an agenda to try to steer her to perhaps making a different choice. Why? Because it would make me feel better, and it would make me feel at peace and content and safe and taken care of. And because of these practices, I realized her choices, no matter her choices, my well-being and worthiness is not dependent on how she shows up and the choices she makes in her life. And so I looked at her and I said, I support you. And it was a new experience for me, but it was also a new experience for her to have her mother just fully accept and support her decision. And so there was this another pause and just eye contact, so much said with just silence. Mm. And then she, who is very intellectual, very academic, very smart, not so much of the heart in the sense of expressing in that way. And she touched her heart and said, that means so much, Mom. Mm. And it was just such a moment. And then, so that was precious in itself. Ever since then, she has been sharing more, reaching out for me more, and sharing things that really she hadn't shared to that level and depth before. And so it just opened up a new level and depth of our relationship. And so I can't stress enough, these practices seem so basic, so simple, not always easy to do, but it's almost as if, and you have talked about this, Suzi, you're making little deposits in the bank, and those deposits begin to compound and grow exponentially to where the effects are just huge.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It's so touching. I had chills a couple of times in my body when you were sharing that. I think for everyone listening to hear you so aware that your old self would have, and I can relate to this also with a beautiful bow and artfully, as you said, artfully try to quote, convince her to really do it your way. I think again, as I was saying to Joe and Maureen, thank you for being so authentic because I think everyone can relate to that. We can have a smile on our face, but the other person is really reading our energy. And she would have read that you're smiling, but it really isn't okay with you. And you're saying that by making these deposits within your own account, your own recognizing, oh, I see the ways I am seeking to micromanage, I am seeking to control so that everyone's outer behavior will have me feel comfortable. Can anybody relate that's listening right now? Oh, I think I'm doing it for their good, right? Because I think that choice would be better for them. But when I look beneath the surface, I want myself to feel more comfortable. So I micromanage. And you are aware enough to see that pattern in you. And as you paused and practiced and made your deposits, then, like you're saying, when something did arise in your outer world, you were able then to sincerely, because you have practiced accepting all the messy parts of you that want to control, that want to micromanage, like Joe was saying, that wanted to knock on that door. You have met those places with tenderness, like Maureen was saying, and been with that. Then when something actually happened in your outer life where she was going to make a choice that I would say would probably, you could say, dramatically different than what you would have chosen, you were able, you had that expanded space in your heart that your discomfort was already taken care of. And so you had calm inside to be able to be in that expansive space to hear her choice and say, I support you. And she felt it because your energy was so aligned. And so I so appreciate that example. It's such a great example, as was yours and Maureen's, Joe's and Maureen's, that as we practice, and I hope as we conclude and come to completion here, that those of you listening are hearing the tangible ways that, yes, it's a practice called self-love, but there are very tangible questions we're asking each other. There's very tangible practices. Joe went and sat himself down on the sofa and let himself have a temper tantrum, like been with those big feelings. Like there's phrases. What do you need? I accept you exactly as you are. It's okay, Joe. You didn't do anything wrong. So go back, listen to this episode again, maybe take notes on the phrases that spoke to you. And as you hear something that spoke to you, you will also elicit from within you more insights, language that speaks to you. You will hear what it is that you need to be saying to yourself, the ways you need to be treating yourself. Often it comes out of the ways we weren't treated as a child, but it also comes out of the inspiration of hearing other people, which is why I wanted you all on this episode. So I thank you all. I thank you so much for being so authentic, so open, so real. I thank you so much for your specifics and your specificity of examples and phraseology and qualities and essence. And I hope that everyone listening has lots of notes and takeaways, and we will certainly do many more of these episodes. So thank you all. I just so appreciate you so much. I wanted to give each of you the shout out, and we'll go in the same order: Maureen, then Joe, then Devon, just where everybody can find you. As I said at the beginning, each one of you are coaches in your own right. you work with individuals, both your own personal, but clients, and just where everyone can find you, because I'm sure that people are going to want to get in touch with you and hear more. So do you want to go, Maureen? I'll also have it in the show notes for everyone, but just share.
Well, thank you so much, Suzi. Thanks for having me amongst this great conversation today. And it's MaureenSpielman.com, and everything is there. So thank you.
Cool. And you, Joseph?
Yeah, likewise. Thank you. What a pleasure to be with all of you today. I could go for another couple hours, but like Maureen, you can find me at josephargazzi.com and all the social media places. So thank you.
Awesome. And it will be in the show notes. And Devon?
You can find me at Devon Evans Coaching on Instagram.
Beautiful. Devon Evans Coaching on Instagram. Excellent. Thank you all. We'll definitely have another conversation for sure. I ditto you, Joe. I could sit here for another 2 hours. It's been just really rich for me and so soul satisfying. So thank you all. I appreciate you guys, and I just acknowledge and admire you all so much. Much love, everyone. Give yourself permission to thrive this week, and I'll see you next week with more on love and self-love. Thank you so much for listening. If there was something in this conversation that spoke to you, we'd so appreciate it if you would take the time to subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and share this episode with women and mothers you know, because you are here to thrive. See you next time.